Today is Wednesday, November the 12th, 2003. I'm H.T. Macklin, the interviewer, and it's my pleasure to interview this morning Rose Cunningham. Let me see this right here, Rose. Rose, for the record on the videotape, please give us your full name, including your maiden name,
Sure.
and your address and where you live here in Atlanta.
Yes, my name is Rose Gold, is my maiden name,
Gold.
Cunningham. Living there for 45 years.
That's same address?
Same address.
My. All right. I understand that you spent your first few years in Romania.
I was born in Bucharest, Romania.
Mm-hmm. Tell me what some of your earliest recollections about Bucharest.
Well, Bucharest is a modern city,
Yes.
and with a great French culture. I went to a Catholic school, and my father was in the French diplomatic corps, and my mother was Romanian.
Mm-hmm.
And at the age of 12, no, at the age of 11, I was uprooted. And at the age of 11, after having celebrated Christmas and Easter and going to a private Catholic school, I learned that I was Jewish.
After 11 years?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We never, in my home, we never mentioned the word Jewish. We never celebrated any of the Jewish holidays. I had no idea that we were Jewish, and that's the reason we were leaving Romania. And it was 1939 when war started.
And you were 11 years old then?
Yes.
What year were you born?
1927, but that in December I was
Yes.
born. So now you know exactly if I lied or not.
Right. So you were 11 years old when you discovered that you were not
I was
Catholic,
Jewish.
but you were Jewish.
Well, I
Were
discovered
both your parents Jewish?
Yes, and I had no idea because, like I said before, I was raised as a Catholic, I celebrated all the Catholic holidays. So it came as a tremendous shock to find out that I was not who I thought I was.
How did that affect you? What did you think about that?
I was angry, extremely angry, because I felt like
What was the source of your anger?
I was angry because I was not who I thought I was. I had friends, who were Catholics, and I was raised, I went to a strictly Catholic school. I wanted to be a nun when I was 11. And all of a sudden, I'm told by my dad, we're leaving because, why are we leaving? We had a gorgeous house. And then he told me because we are Jewish and we have to leave Europe because of Hitler. War had not started yet. No, but it started that year.
What year was this?
That was in 1939.
39.
At the beginning of 1939.
What do you have some idea of what he and your mother heard about what was happening that caused them to suddenly decide to leave?
My father was in the diplomatic corps. He got fired from his job because he was Jewish.
Oh, they knew he was Jewish.
Well, they knew that he had Jewish roots. They all know. They know that. However, like I said before, none of us thought we were Jewish.
Did
So
you
it
have
came as
brothers
a
and
real.
sisters?
Yes, I had a brother. He's dead now. He was 2 years older, and he went to a Catholic school also. So it was really a shock. And of course, we were uprooted. We had to leave everything and go to France, because that's where my father was born. That was in 1939. And we went to France.
So you went to France from Romania.
We went to France
How
because
did you get there?
by train, deluxe.
Were there any problems of your traveling to France?
The only problem we had is when we arrived at the border of Ventimiglia, which is in Italy. My mother had
Between Italy and France.
Yeah, my mother had a Romanian passport, and the guards stopped us and said, "You can't. Without a visa to France, you can't go into France." My father was furious. He said, "She has a diplomatic. If you look at it closer, it's a diplomatic passport. She never had any troubles before." And the guard said, "Well, I'm sorry, but these are very uncertain times, and she must have a visa. You and the children can proceed, but not Mrs. Gold." So we had to go to Rome, to the French embassy, which my father knew everybody, and to secure a French visa for my mother. And we did that.
Did you have to wait a few days?
No, while we were there. My father knew the way, he knew. He was in the diplomatic corps, so he knew what you have to do.
What were his duties in the diplomatic?
He was a commercial attaché.
And what did that involve?
It involved traveling a lot, and of course my father spoke 5 languages, and so do I. And so he was very busy in his career. And then when they fired him,
And they fired him because he had
he was,
Jewish.
oh yeah, absolutely, sure. And they were firing all the Jews. And of course, there was a tremendous anti-Semitic feeling in Romania, which I didn't know. I was a child. I didn't know the anti-Semitic feeling in Romania was tremendous. And that's one reason that my parents never divulged the fact that we were actually Jewish when we didn't practice Judaism. We didn't practice. You know, we were not. In Europe, it's different than in the States. You know, here you go to a church or to a synagogue, and it's part of the social strata. Not there. You go to a church or synagogue and pray, and then you leave. Nobody knows you. It's done. And this is done even today. It has nothing to do with the social aspect of your life.
So the release of your father from his diplomatic post came because of how the Romanians viewed Jews,
Yeah.
rather than pressure from the German side at that
No,
time.
not German, the French.
I mean, French side.
Well, he was French.
Yeah, I see, okay.
So that's what happened in 1939, at the beginning of 1939. And the purpose of going to France was that my father was going to secure visas to any country that would take us to get out of Europe. He saw the sign. He was very intelligent. He was up to date. And he's made a lot of money, and he sent the money to the United States. He was very smart about that. And he, because he dealt in the stock market, and he just saw the handwriting on the wall. He knew we had to get out of there.
And from all he had heard, even in 1939.
Oh, it started in
He
1936.
could see it all coming.
Oh, sure. The concentration camps started long before 39. Everybody knew about it except the Americans. They didn't know.
Were there concentration
Oh,
camps
yeah.
in Romania?
I don't know.
Don't know.
They were, no. But they were
So when
Germany.
when your parents secured the visa in Italy for you to go to France, then you.
Well, then we
proceeded
went to France.
forthwith.
And then we went to France and we went to Paris. First, my father knew Paris inside out. And he started going to all the countries that could issue a visa. Of course, in the United States, you can't buy a visa. But you can in all the other countries. And he tried everything. Hong Kong, he tried South America, Brazil. And finally, the country that came through was Cuba.
Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you live in France then?
To 42. We left February 42.
Left February 4th.
Yeah, we already were under German occupation.
You were already under, and they had not discovered that you were Jewish?
We were hiding.
Oh, you were in hiding. Did friends hide you there?
No, we did.
You
My
did
father,
yourself.
my father was a very enterprising young man. He knew how to get around.
What was the nature of the place where you hid? Was it
Close to Marseille.
Oh, the coast in Marseille.
Yeah, in Marseille.
Uh-huh.
In Marseille. But before Marseille, of course, we were in Paris, and my father sent us to a summer camp. Well, he could. It was not war yet. War was not declared until September 3rd, 1939, and I know that date. It's very clear in my mind because on that date, my brother and I were having a picnic on the beach in Port-Manec, in Brittany, at a summer camp where my parents were in Paris trying to secure a visa.
How long had you been in Paris by that time?
Few months. See, we arrived in February, and this was June. So we went to, my brother and I went to Port-Manec to the summer camp. My father found out about it, and it was lovely. And then on September 3rd, we heard the war started. England and France declared war on Germany. And then the camp was dismantled, closed. And my parents came over to Brittany to get us. But they decided that they loved Port-Manec, they loved that part of France, Bretagne. And they decided to rent a cottage and stay there and wait there for the visa. Well, the war started, but you know, it was a funny war. I don't know if you are a historian. Do you remember? The first 6 months, nothing really happened.
That's true.
Because it was like was it a war? Yeah. You didn't hear about it, nothing. You didn't know what the Germans were occupying other countries. Yes. They didn't bother too much with France. Of course, when they did, they invaded. That Maginot Line was worse than nothing, and then they came right through in 40, I was in 41. So anyway, we stayed there for 6 months. And then we went back to Paris. Nothing happened. My father said, no, we got to go back to Paris. We went back to Paris.
Had the Nazis occupied?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Oh no, we would never gone back then.
Yes.
No, this was 1940, and we stayed till 41. In 41, a day before the Germans occupied Paris, we left on a train to Marseilles.
The day before.
Day before. The date.
So
The
you
date
left-
was June. I think it was June 12. It's all in my book.
Yes. So you left then for Marseille.
Hmm.
And where did you go in Marseille?
Well, we went to Bordeaux first.
For Bordeaux.
Bordeaux, there was a bombardment, terrific bombardment. Everybody had to get.
German bombardment?
No, it was the British.
British.
I learned later.
Yeah.
We had to get off the train, and we were almost killed there. The station was bombed. There were blood and smoke everywhere. It was awful. I'll never forget that place.
Was there an awareness that the bombs were falling?
Oh,
from
gosh,
British-
yeah.
I mean, from British.
No, we didn't know that.
Didn't know
No, I knew that. I learned later.
Later.
It was the British, yeah. But anyway, we had a little suitcase, and we started walking in the country away from the station. But in the station, there were a lot of dead. And we walked, and we came to this farm. And my father had money, and he told the farmer, look, why don't you let us stay here a few days? We're on our way to Marseille. And the farmer did.
And you walked there.
We walked, yes.
Was that a few miles out of town?
I don't remember where it was a long time for me.
Long time, right.
And the suitcase got heavier and
I
heavier.
bet it did.
So anyway,
And
then
on the farm now?
Yeah.
Where did the farmer put you up?
in the barn,
In the barn?
yeah,
Were you up in the hayloft?
Yeah,
or
right.
something like that?
right. And then one day, my father had gone to town. My father spoke German fluently. He went to town and he saw the Germans. They were there.
They were in Marseille.
No, this was before Marseille. This was in close to Bordeaux, a little
Okay,
town. I don't
okay.
remember the name of it.
All right.
So he came running back to the farm and he said, we got to leave. They're here. And the farmer came up and he said, I can't keep you any longer because I could go to jail. Because he was strictly against the French law to help Jews.
Yes.
And he did buy us a car, a second-hand car. My father had money, so that's what saved us.
So
Well-
he bought you a car.
Well, you know, he bought us a jalopy.
Yeah, in any case, it had four wheels that he
Yeah, I had 4 wheels, but it broke down all the time. My father hated it. He hated to
What
drive,
did
but
you do at that point?
we drove to Marseille. The car broke down, and we had to walk again.
You
And
just left the car at the side of the road.
we left it. It was a wreck.
Yes.
I had a lot of money. We paid a lot of money for that. And then we found there was an organization in Marseille that helped the Jews.
How did you
Escape.
How did your father
My
discover
I don't know.
his connection?
My father knew everybody. It was amazing how well connected he was, how smart, how resourceful he was. Had he not been, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Yeah. So he found an apartment, and an attic apartment. That's where we were hiding. And then started going again to all the, all the embassies, all the consulates to find a visa. And Cuba came through, and that was in 42.
And where was the Cuban embassy?
Well, it was at the consulate
Oh, the consulate.
in Marseille.
It was in Marseille. And on what?
They were selling visas.
Oh, they were selling.
Oh,
visas.
yes.
Do you remember how much the visa cost?
$1,000 per person, and in 1942, $1,000 like
That was
200,000
a lot
today.
of money.
Yeah. And he bought the visas, and also he bought passage on the last ship that was leaving the next day. So he was, go, 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 go.
Was it a passenger ship?
No,
or a
you're kidding?
freighter?
Freighter.
Oh, just a
It
freighter.
was a freighter, and we went to Spain, crossed the Gibraltar.
What type of, what were they? Were they ferrying on the freighter? Were they carrying freight back to Cuba?
No, they were not going to Cuba. They were going to Casablanca.
Oh, Casablanca.
And they had a lot of sheep. It stunk.
Live sheep.
Yeah, live sheep. And we were 500 Jewish refugees on board. You've got to understand that these Jews were the most educated and the wealthiest one that could get away. A lot of Jews didn't. They were. So anyway, we arrived in Casablanca. There we had to change ships. And the second ship was the one that took us to Cuba. And it was a 6-week journey in
Go
February.
down through the South Atlantic.
Yes, it was horrible. I was sick all the time. I was already sick.
Again, was it a cargo type ship?
Cargo, absolutely cargo. Men
And
on
on the ship to Casablanca, with 500 refugees aboard, obviously there was not sufficient cabins.
No, there were
so
no cabins at all.
So you just stayed on the deck.
The women were on one side and the men on the other. We stayed on the deck because the Straits of Gibraltar were bombed, not bombed, excuse me, mined. And we were told we could not go lie down. It was an overnight trip. We had to stay on the deck. Women on one side, men on the other with our life jackets. You can imagine, I was 12 already by then. And I tell you.
Was there anything to eat?
I was 13.
On the
Yeah, they gave us some things to eat, if you can call that food. After we paid $500 per person for the voyage.
For the passage.
No, to Cuba.
All the way to Cuba.
I got to tell you another story. See this gold coin I'm wearing? Yes. This is a Napoleon. It's a 20 franc gold piece, 1902. And my parents had a lot of these. They traded these for food when we were in Marseilles. Because gold, during war, money's worth nothing. Gold is. So and there were 4 left, and this is the symbol of my mother. And I carry it with me every day. She's with me. So anyway, we arrived in Cuba. I was sick. I had the beginning of tuberculosis.
Let me back up just a little bit. When you got to Casablanca, you debarked from the ship.
Yes.
And were you a few days there? Or did you go directly onto the other ship?
We were there a couple of days, waiting for another ship.
And did you just wait at the harbor?
No, we were put in some kind of a building.
Some kind of a building.
I don't remember, but we had beds. Mm-hmm. I remember one thing. I had a 12-egg omelet.
A 12-egg?
12 egg, each one of us. Because, eggs were rationed. Everything was rationed. And we were not entitled but to 1 egg a month per person in Marseilles. So we ate plentiful, and fruits and everything. Oh, Casablanca was like heaven.
It must have seemed like a little bit of heaven.
It was heaven. And the fruits and tropical fruits. And
all of those were available in Casablanca?
Everything. You wouldn't believe war was on. Casablanca was like it was in another world. In 42. See, in 42, the United States was already at war.
Yes.
And see, what happened was in 41, when Pearl Harbor took place, the Germans were not in Marseille. They had a demarcation zone. But when the Americans declared war on Germany, they occupied all of France. And that is where we knew we just had to leave. Had we not left, again, I tell you, the French would have sent us to die in a concentration camp.
The French?
The French government, the Vichy government, at that time was anti-Semitic. They're still anti-Semitic today. Yes, certainly. And they would send the Jews. They sent over 100,000 Jews to die. French Jews, mind you. There were very few exceptions that escaped.
Once your parents told you that the family was fleeing Romania because you were in fact Jewish, mm-hmm. was there any effort on the part of the family from that time to did their Jewishness make any difference in how they're attending a synagogue anywhere?
No, we never did.
Never did.
Never.
Never did.
No.
They were all.
I didn't know anything about the Jewish religion.
Right.
Nothing, except that we were Jews and we had to leave. Mm-hmm.
Well,
that was our crime.
I'm sure it was a shock when you found it out. Between the time you found it out and perhaps by the time you got to Cuba, did either you or was it your brother? Did either of you, question your parents about the fact that you were Jews and why?
Well, we did that before. We did that on the train to Paris. Uh-huh. Both of us, because my brother was 2 years older. Nothing. We just asked him, well, what is going on? How come we're Jewish? Since when we're Jewish? And all that. Why do we have to leave? What's wrong? We didn't understand. We were children. We didn't understand about Hitler and the concentration camps. It's dangerous. We have to leave. We're Jews and we're Jewish. We have Jewish antecedents, what you call it, and we have to leave. Otherwise, we're on a death list. And sure enough, we would have died. We would have died if we had stayed. So we went to Cuba, and Cuba was heaven.
So the voyage was 6 weeks.
6 weeks long, and I was so sick.
Was it a rough voyage?
Oh, it was awful. For me especially, I had a beginning of TB, and I was sick, already sick. I was seasick. I was everything sick.
How many of you were aboard the freighter?
500. Same Jews that came on the other.
And again, you were all just deck passengers.
Oh no, no. They had cots in the
Hold?
in the hold. They had cots, men and women again separated, and they had cargo. I can remember. They had grains. I don't know. It was a freighter. Santa Maria was the name.
Was it a Spanish freighter?
Yes. It was Santa Maria. Yeah. The first ship was Portuguese. The second one was Spanish.
Now, between Casablanca and Cuba, did it make any intermediate stops anywhere?
Oh yeah, we stopped in Jamaica. We stopped in Mexico, in Veracruz.
Were you able to get off the ship?
I had to go to the hospital every time because I was sick. I was the only one that was allowed, my family and I, to go to the hospital.
What
And,
sort of help did you get at the hospital?
you know, just x-rays and what could they do? Nothing much because I didn't stay there. And same thing, telling, you know, my parents that.
They confirmed that you had tuberculosis?
Yeah, well, I had the beginning of tuberculosis.
Beginning
Yeah, and I had to be treated. It was penicillin and whatever they had in those days. But I couldn't because we couldn't stay there. I had to wait till we got to Cuba. Well,
So when the ship, what port did the ship dock at in Cuba?
Havana.
In Havana.
When, you know, I got something very interesting to tell you about that.
And tell me about life in Havana, where you lived in that.
Wait a minute. Let's back up. When
Okay.
we arrived at the ship.
Ah, okay.
When we arrived at the ship, the Cuban officials came on board and said,
In
Batista.
Havana Harbor.
Yeah. Well, we did not dock. They stopped us in the middle of the harbor and they came on board, the officials. And they said, sorry, but the visas you have are no good. This was during Batista's time. If you want to stay in Cuba, you've got to pay another $500 per person. If not, if you can raise the money, we're going to put you in a camp, which is across the bay from Havana. Tiscornia was the name of it. Until if you think you can raise the money. If not, you have to go back to Europe. Well, there were some Jews on board. When they heard that, they jumped ship and drowned.
Just jumped over the side.
And the rest accepted to go to that camp. That was the last ship from Europe.
Did the rest of you then on there give them some guarantee, more or less, that you would raise?
Yeah, my father said, yeah, they interviewed every one of us. And my father said, yes, my father had contacts in the United States. He had money. That's what saved us. And all these people were rich Jews, I told you before. They were all educated people. They were all in the diamond business. They were all in professors and doctors and lawyers. And all of this was the cream of the crop. You know, it was not the everyday. It was really highly educated Europeans that had the means to get out and had the brains to get out. Because a lot of Jews, you know, that had a lot of money. There were a lot of Jews stayed in Europe because they said, well, nothing's going to happen to us. We're too rich. But they died in concentration camp also. Anyway, so we were in the camp for 6 months.
How long did you sit on the ship before they let you?
No, they came and got us in tenders and took us to the camp.
Of the same day?
Yeah. And we stayed in the camp 6 months.
What sort of camp was it?
It was very pleasant. It was like being in a resort. They had food, plenty food. And the Europeans that were on board, they formed a school. They organized a school. And I went to school. And the children, because there were a lot of children. French.
In French.
I learned all about the Greek mythology. Oh, it was tremendous. Do you know that school? I'll tell you the truth, it was so advanced. It would put a school here to shame, what we learned when I was 12. The things that I learned. And then I would read a book every day. Oh, it was a highly intelligent group of people. So we stayed 6 months, and then the money came through, and then we were allowed to go to Havana. And we started
to leave the camp.
Yeah.
How did he get funds transferred from the U.S. to
Probably,
Cuba?
yes, I guess he did. I don't know. But he had the money.
And where did you move to in Havana?
Well, this Jewish organization, again, was very well organized. They found us an apartment in Old Havana. And I started going to school and learned Spanish. It didn't take me long.
What was life like living in Havana at that time?
It was wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous. Havana was a gorgeous city. Not today. It's all destroyed and run down. It's awful. I know I've been there 3 years ago. And because there were many jewelers on board. They started a new industry. It was a diamond cutting industry. There were a lot of Jews from Belgium. And they started that new industry, and my brother worked in that industry.
In Cuba?
It was great. My father got a job with the National Cash Register Company, started selling cash registers. And he became #1 salesman, so we moved to a better place. And then I went to school, and of course I was growing, you know.
And the school was taught in French?
No, in Spanish.
In Spanish.
Oh no, that school was taught in Spanish. No, I already learned Spanish.
Yeah.
The French, of course, I already spoke Romanian and French. And I had an understanding of German also. And that was very common for Europeans to speak many languages. So I started, I had a normal life, met some girls that were on the same ship, and we became very close friends. As a matter of fact, we kept the friendship to now, to today. And we had a reunion in Cuba 3 years ago with those girls, you know.
When you went back to Cuba 3 years ago,
yeah.
Was the house in Havana where you lived still standing?
I could not find it.
Couldn't find it.
No, I looked for it. But my other friend, Ingrid, found her place. And
Was she also from Romania?
no, she was German. We became very close. There were 4 of us. One was, Florence and I were French, and then Ingrid and Jane were German.
But they were all Jewish.
Everybody was Jewish. Everybody was Jewish. And they were, of course, Jewish. In other words, they knew they were Jewish. They went to a Jewish school. They knew they were not like me, that I didn't know I was Jewish.
Right.
And their family practiced Judaism, except Florence. Florence did not, but Jane and Ingrid did.
Once you were settled in Havana then, was there any, did you ever go to the synagogue there?
Never. That's one thing my father, and we didn't go to any church. None. We didn't, not in my family. And I regret it. I wish we were something, because I loved the ritual and the traditions. I wish we had followed the Jewish traditions. I think they were nice.
But he was, your parents were obviously so traumatized by the whole scene in Romania.
That's right.
That it was just, from their perspective, an
Oh, no.
impossible situation.
Impossible, yeah. So then I was a teenager, and one summer I got a job at a local, I was 16, I got a job at a bookstore in Havana to work in the summer, and that was hard because I spoke so many languages. And one day this drunk, old, stinking man came in, and he was Ernest Hemingway. So I met him.
Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah, it's in my book.
Yes.
You got to get my book and read this.
Did you have any idea who he was?
No, I threw a book on his head, as a matter of fact, on purpose, because he would make me go up the ladder. Oh, excuse me. God, let me cut this thing off. Can you cut that off? Anyway, Ernest Hemingway, I'll never forget it, because he was a lecturer.
Did Hemingway have a beard at the time?
Oh, he was filthy. He had a beard. Drunk. He'd come into my bookstore. It was next door to the Floridita bar, and he'd go in the morning and have his cocktail there. Then he'd come to the bookstore to see how many books we had sold. I didn't know who he was. I was 16, you know. All I know is that he would say to me, climb that ladder and get me the book over there, because he wanted to look under my skirt. And so I dropped the book on his head, and the owner of the bookstore came running, and he said, well, Hemingway was very angry, and he left angry. And he said, what did you do? I said, oh, it was an accident. I dropped, it was not, I lied.
When did you realize, you know, what sort of man he was or who he was?
Ernest, because my boss told me.
Oh, she told you?
He said, I'll fire you if you do any more. This was Ernest Hemingway, the most famous writer in the world at that time. So I don't care. He's always drunk and always bothers me.
Did he come back into the bookstore?
Every day.
Never did?
Oh, yeah, he did.
He kept coming back?
Kept coming back, running after me. Remember, I was 16 and he was a dirty old man. In all respect of the word.
And he was living in Havana at the time?
Oh, yeah, he lived in Havana years.
Yes.
That's where he wrote The Old Man in the Sea.
Right.
Oh, he was a great artist, another author. Anyway, that was one of...
What did your parents do in Havana?
My father worked for the National Cash Register Company.
Yeah, he was, and your mom?
My mother just ran the house. She never worked.
Did he travel out of Cuba?
No.
Just within
Just in Havana.
the country?
He couldn't.
Yeah.
He couldn't. We couldn't come to the United States. That we wanted to, but we couldn't.
So you were in Cuba for about 2 years?
Oh no, I was in Cuba 6 years.
6 years?
Yeah, 6 years.
And did you finish your
I finished high school and started college.
What college did you go to?
The University of Havana, first year. I was 18.
What
And
were you reading there? What were you studying?
languages.
Languages.
Yeah, for me it was the easiest.
Yeah.
And then one day I was invited to go to the USO dance. And the USO organization in Cuba was run by some matrons, very wealthy matrons of Cuba. It was very strict, and you had to come with a chaperone. It was my mother to the dances, but it was very nice. It was not how some of the other USOs were run. This one was really nice, and the girls were all very nice. And that's where I met my husband. He was in the Air Force, John Cunningham, and he had just...
And he was based in Cuba?
Well, he had just flown 50 combat missions in Europe, and they sent him to Cuba to do something. He was an engineer, the engineer on board and bombardier. They sent him to Cuba.
What type of aircraft did he fly?
B-24s and B-17s. As a matter of fact, he bombed Ploiești, next door to Bucharest. Yeah, he was on the Ploiești raid. So I met
So
him.
you met him at the USO?
I met him at a dance. I was 18 years old. And I couldn't speak English. He couldn't speak Spanish. Couldn't speak anything. How could he? He came from Alabama. We just, I guess we liked each other. He liked me for sure.
Well, did he learn Spanish quickly?
No, you kidding? He's from Alabama, I tell you. Never learned it today.
So you learned English quickly?
I learned English quickly. And he courted me, and he came over to ask my mother, and a year later we got married.
What did your parents think of him?
My father hated him
Why?
because he was an American. Because he wanted to marry his daughter. My mother liked him, but my father didn't like him at all. Well, my father never liked, how fathers are. Well, maybe you don't know. But to him, he was a stranger.
Did your parents think you were too young at the time?
Oh, yeah. They didn't want me to. I wanted to get married and come to the United States. And every time I had a quarrel with my husband, I always would tell him, I married you because I wanted to come to the United States. We've been married 56 years now. How about that? Yeah. So John was, of course, a World War II hero. And we got married and flew to from Havana to Miami. And then we came on a bus to Atlanta, Georgia. And John was discharged from the Air Force. And he started Georgia Tech. He wanted to be an architect. That was his dream. And he became an architect, and he did very well in his career. He had his own company, and he built a lot of banks. He specialized in banks, and he became quite successful. So
when did how long did you know John, actually, before you
1
got
year.
married?
Not even, because he wasn't there all the time. A little less than a year.
A little less than a year.
Yeah.
And what did your father say when you announced you were ready to
Well,
get married?
when John wrote to me from the United States, and he said, let's get married by proxy, and on the telephone, my father went to the embassy, and he didn't know about this proxy. He was very clever, though, and they told him it's illegal. So when he heard that, he hired a detective to have John to find out who he really was. And then we found out that John was married, and he was getting a divorce. He was married, and he stayed married for 6 months. But he did get his divorce, and I was determined to marry him. And my father and he said, the only way he can marry you, he has to come to Cuba. Not going to do it, well, it was illegal.
How long from the time you met him at the USO dance until he returned to the U.S.? How much?
About a year.
About a year. He was in Cuba for about a year then.
Well, off and on.
Off and on.
Yeah, off
was
and
he
on.
flying out of
Yeah,
there?
he was flying in and out. Yeah.
Where was he flying to from?
San Juan. He was flying to San Juan and Miami. And I don't know, Seattle, I think he flew to, because he was still in the Armed Forces.
Still in the Air Force.
He was still in the Air Force. Yeah, he didn't get a discharge until he went back and got his discharge and started enrolled in Georgia Tech. He had already enrolled before we got married. He enrolled at Georgia Tech on the GI Bill, and then he came back. We got married. I came back to the States with him, and I was utterly miserable, homesick, cold. It was December. It was horrible.
Was your wedding in Havana?
Yeah, we got married at a restaurant. Well, at the city hall, and then we went to the restaurant. It was just my parents, my brother, and I. You know, in those days, the wedding's not like here. No. Not in our case. You know.
Well, your father obviously finally consented.
Finally consented, but never liked him. Never, even later on.
Why do you think he finally gave in? Because he saw that you were simply going to do it anyway?
Yes, he said it. Exactly. So I came to Atlanta, and here I was in Atlanta, and to me, Atlanta, this was before 1950, actually, it was 1947. And I disliked it immensely. I found this.
What did you dislike about Atlanta?
It was so provincial.
Provincial?
Yeah.
In what way?
Nobody spoke any languages, you know. Everybody was suspicious, you know, narrow-minded. And his family was terrible to me. They belonged to the belt, what do they call that belt?
The cotton belt?
Yeah, you know, they were, his parents were his family was typical Southern
did they live
religious.
Did they live here in Atlanta?
Some of them did, and some of them live in Alabama. So his family and I didn't get along at all because they considered me Jewish. And they said, and not only a Jew, but one of multiple languages in multiple countries, what's that? I mean, that hit them the wrong way. So I had nothing to do with them.
What was his parents' religious affiliation?
Methodist. Southern Methodist.
Southern Methodist
Yes.
at the time, yes.
His father was a bus driver. They were nice, you know,
Yeah.
simple.
I mean, like a MARTA driver?
Yeah, he was a MARTA driver. Well, he wasn't MARTA then.
No, I know, but it was.
Georgia Power was there.
Right,
And, you know, they were down-to-earth people, never traveled. And to me, I had nothing in common with them. And the only decent person in that family was his mother. She treated me nicely. But his sisters and brothers, and he came from a large family, they just considered me a strange animal. So I never had anything to do with them. I found my own friends, which most of them were European. And
was there an influx of Europeans into Atlanta?
small, but it was, and I found them. But what I did, I decided that I wanted. Well, I went to school too. I went to university. I went to Georgia State to learn English. My English was very limited, so I went to school. I signed up to finish. I wanted to finish my education. I went to school.
How far had you gotten in your education?
1 year.
1 year
I
at
only had 1
college,
year, yeah.
university, there, right?
And I took languages again. You know.
Did your credit hours from the University in Nevada transfer to
Yeah,
Georgia State?
in those days it did. Today you couldn't do that, but
Yes.
then you could.
So you went into Georgia State then as a sophomore?
Yeah. So I took English.
What was their English language teaching like at Georgia State? Because that
It was very nice.
That was a time when the English as a second language was simply unknown.
Oh, sure.
So was it just a part of the English department?
Oh, yeah, it was English department, yeah. And I took English, I took logic, so I could understand English. And I took drama also, because I want to be in a play. And then one day I decided, I went to the YMCA, and I talked to them about, have you ever thought about offering conversation classes to adults in French and Spanish? Never crossed their mind. And they said, you know, that's not a bad idea. But why would we need a book? I said, I'll write the book. And I did. I wrote a book for conversation, Spanish and French. As a matter of fact, I use that book now at Emory. That has been revised and redone. But we started the classes, and they were extremely successful. Adult education, non-credit.
Right.
And that's how that program for adult education got started in Atlanta, Georgia, by me. No, not at Emory, at the YMCA. No, at Emory was much later, much later.
Now, are these conversation courses in French and Spanish? Is this a part of the evening at Emory
Yeah,
school now?
continuing education. But I'm not teaching French now. I only teach Spanish. We have 12 classes now.
12.
I have 3 teachers working with me on my program, for me, because I'm the coordinator of the program. Very successful. I'm teaching tonight, as a matter of fact.
Now, you said John's family were Southern Methodist.
Yes.
Were they what you would call practicing Southern Methodist? Including John?
No, no. John became a Presbyterian.
Presbyterian.
Yeah. No, he not practicing at all. John would go to church. He started going to church after our children were born. Then he started going to church.
Did you ever go with him?
Yeah, once or twice. I was extremely bored. And thought the whole ritual was, how would you say, hypocritical.
In what way?
Because, to me, worshiping like that in masses was not worshiping. And I had already some definite ideas about religion. And to me, that was no way of religion. It was organized, and it was organized religion. I didn't like anything that was organized. No, I didn't.
Do you think that attitude was a result of your early Catholic upbringing?
I'm sure, and of the uprooting.
Yeah, of the upbringing, right.
Yeah. So anyway, then I started the classes, and that gave me a little money, so that was fine. John graduated from Georgia Tech, and
In architecture.
in architecture.
What year did he graduate?
He in 1950. He and John Portman graduated at the same time.
And did you complete your studies at Georgia State?
Not completely. I went to the University of Madrid to complete. That's when I had the rest was that part. I was finished. I had a degree.
What year did you go to Madrid to do that?
In Madrid, I was. When was that? In 1960.
1960.
No, 59, 60. I think it's 64 or 63. I don't remember. No. But before that, we need to back up a little bit.
Yes.
Before that. I got very involved in the small international life of Atlanta. I joined we had an international club, of which I became president. And later on, of course, all these clubs were separated by countries. You had a country, I think there's your other person, but it's too early.
Yeah. No, there's something else.
Okay. Then I got very involved in the aspect. Anything that was international, I was in it. So I became quite well known. So one day I went to the Chamber of Commerce. Oh, let's back up just a few minutes. Between that time, of course, I raised my family.
Tell me about your children. What children did you have?
We had two girls.
What years were they?
Marcel was born, Valerie was born in 1957, Valerie was born, she'll never forgive me. Valerie was born in 57, and Marcel was born in 59. So we had two girls.
Do they live in the Atlanta area?
No, Marcel lives in Paris.
In Paris.
And Valerie lives in Chicago, and she has grandchildren, two children. Marcel doesn't have any children. She doesn't have a husband either.
What does she do in Paris?
She worked for United Airlines for 10 years, and they just let her go. They closed the department, moved it to London. And she's still in Paris, and she's not going to come here. She doesn't like it here.
Mm-hmm. She's going to remain in Paris.
She wants to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when your husband, what year did he graduate from Georgia
50.
Tech? 1950. Mm-hmm. And did he open his architecture business then?
No, he got a job. It was a bank building and equipment corporation. They specialize in banks, and we moved to St. Louis.
To St. Louis?
Mm-hmm. We lived there for 2 years. It was awful. Hot in the summer, cold in the winter. And one day we looked at each other. He had a very good job. And we said, listen, I don't want to make Atlanta, St. Louis my home. I didn't like it. It had a German influence. And we said, you know what, let's go back to Atlanta. And we packed everything, bought a new car, drove back to Atlanta. And he started working for another company, another architectural firm, but then he got fired because there wasn't that much work, and they let him go.
What year would that have been?
That was in 50, I would say in 53 or 4. Mm-hmm. So then he said, that's it, I'm going to start my own company. And he started in the basement of our house, where he's now. So, but and he started off with nothing, had no money, no connections, but he became a very well-known architect. He had 18 employees. He's retired now, and he's on Cunningham and Associates, very well known, and he's done quite well.
And his specialty in architecture was
banks and jails.
Banks and jails. Mm-hmm. That's quite.
First the bank, then you go to jail. First you rob the bank, and then you go to jail. So he did some other, but he did commercial. But he started his business. He was doing great, and I was bored to death. I said, I have to do something with my life besides teaching. That wasn't enough. So I went to the after the girls were born, they were getting a little older, you know. Well, they were small, but I had a live-in help from Costa Rica that I brought in. So before I went to the chamber, my husband and I went to an evening, to a reception for the foreign minister of Costa Rica. And there I met the foreign minister of Costa Rica, Hernan Garon was his name. And during that time, the Mexican government had asked me if I would be interested in becoming the honorary consul, because I spoke Spanish fluently, and French, and all the other languages, you know. And then I studied Italian also. I speak 5 languages. So they wanted to know, but I didn't accept. It was nothing certain. That was honorary, an honorary position. But I was very involved with the Alliance for Progress. So then this Minister of Foreign Affairs, Hernan Garon was his name, who grandfather was French, he was very impressed with me, and he said, would you accept the Costa Rican honorary position instead of the Mexican? You haven't accepted yet, have you? I said, no. He said, well, let me go back to Costa Rica and talk to the president. And he did, and they named me consul.
Now, when you are an honorary representative, what does that entail?
Well, it depends on you, how much you want to do. And I did a lot. I was consul for 27 years.
Is it a voluntary?
Voluntary.
Oh, right.
No pay at all, but honorary. But it has a lot of advantages.
Such as?
Well, you meet a lot of interesting people. You go to a lot of interesting gatherings. You're just involved in it's a diplomatic world. And there's nothing more fascinating than being in the diplomatic world. I loved it.
So you had nothing to do with visas or anything?
I did.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yes, I issued visas. Mm-hmm. I certainly did. I issued visas. I could do that. There's some things I couldn't do. I had power of attorney, too. I could sign documents. I could do all of that.
Did you do this from your home?
Yes, I did it from the ex-office of my husband. And later on, so one day I decided that I wanted a sister city for San Jose. You know what a sister city is. So I went to the chamber. The Atlanta Chamber of Commerce was really coming up. It was the Chamber of Commerce, the most well-known in the United States. You know, it was the Ford Atlanta program. Were you here then?
No.
No, you came after. So I went and I met the director, and I said to him, how about a sister city for San Jose? He looked at me and he said, what's that? So you didn't know. I explained to him what it was, and while I was in his office, he said, we got this letter. It's in French. Can you tell me where it comes from? We want to answer. I looked at the letter. I said, yeah, it comes from Switzerland. And he said basil, but in French, basil is bal. We had no idea. So I went home that night and I said, you know, Chamber of Commerce does not have an international department. They don't even know where Switzerland is, or Costa Rica. Well, I made him a proposal. I said, I tell you, I will work 3 times a week, work from 10 to 3, and let's start an international department. And this is how much money I want, which is very little. And they hired me. I became director of the international department and ran the department for 10 years.
For the city?
For the city.
And what did that involve?
Well, I brought in the foreign consulates here. Because of my department, we attracted the Japanese consul, the German were already here, the French, the Swiss, tremendous amount of the Korean. They came here, and then what it involved, we started the first international flight. All that had a lot to do with my department. We entertained foreign visitors in my department. I would take them around, you know, to meet the VIPs. I knew already who was who. Well, I became very popular. I was already consul of Costa Rica. You have to remember that. But that was an honorary position. But that did not present a conflict. And I ran the department. It was extremely successful. Everybody knew me as Miss International. And I advised, Ivan Allen was mayor then, and then Sam Marcel. And I was the advisor for the protocol.
And you were still working 3 days a week?
No, then later on it became full-time.
Full-time.
Yeah. At the beginning it was part-time.
Did that entail going abroad to visit some of these countries you were
Oh yeah, we went to Japan, my husband and I, but we had to pay our own way.
Mm-hmm. The city wouldn't pay that?
No, they would pay for the film, for the camera. And we had a visit to Japan. There I was greeted as an official guest. And I went to Austria because by that time Vienna was a sister city to Atlanta. They knew what a sister city was. And I also went to Romania. I went. This
What
is
was
very.
it? How long had it been since you had been back in Romania?
That was the first time,
First time. How many years intervened there?
1968.
68,
So I left in
39 to 68.
Yeah.
29 years.
I went back.
What were your impressions?
Well, let me tell you why I went back.
Yes.
I went back to take my 10-year-old daughter to meet my family.
Your family was still there.
Oh yeah, it was communism. It was Ceausescu. And I learned that Nixon was going to be there on an official visit. Of course, I spoke Romanian fluently. And I went to my boss and I said, look, Nixon is coming to Romania and I would like to go and I'd like to represent the Atlanta magazine. We had a magazine then. And my boss said, oh, that's great, but I need a press pass. Would you give me a press pass? I said, I'll give you everything except money. I'll also give you the film for the camera. And I was a lousy photographer. Fine. So I went to Romania with my daughter, Marcel, my youngest one. And anyway, this is too.
All right.
Well, my little girl was too. She got sick the day before Nixon was supposed to land, and I was supposed to go to the American embassy and get my credentials. Of course, my family met us at the airport.
What family did you have?
My aunts, my 3 aunts, my
How-
mother's sisters.
How did they survive?
They survived. With some of our money, they were able to sell everything we left
did
behind.
Did they stay in Romania?
Oh yeah,
And somehow
except
evaded?
one went to Israel, because my grandparents had died
Were
by
they
then.
hiding out during the war then?
Yeah, they escaped. They were Jewish,
Yes.
but they escaped.
Did any of them, were any of them apprehended?
No.
None of them.
None of my aunts.
Do you know where they escaped to? Was it in the mountains? Was it?
No, in Bucharest.
They stayed in
They
Bucharest?
stayed in Bucharest. Yeah. They escaped.
That
Of course, they bought their way out too, because don't forget that we led a very privileged life in Romania. My father made a lot of money, and we had gorgeous houses, servants. So when we left everything, the furniture, the silver, the rugs, and we left them in a warehouse. But we told my parents told my aunts, use it, sell it if you have to, and they did, and they survived on that. That sustained
So
them.
that was their salvation, really.
That was part of it. You know, they were lucky.
So what was it like? What were your impressions
awful.
when you went back to
Awful.
Romania?
I went back to Romania and I spoke Romanian, of course.
Yes.
The first thing that happened when they saw my passport, I was born in Romania, I made a big mistake to speak Romanian. Immediately I became suspicious because it was communism. Everybody was suspicious of everybody else.
This was what year was
68.
this? 68.
That's
Oh
when
my.
Nixon went.
Yes, right.
So I stayed at the best hotel, the Sheraton then, no, the Intercontinental. But I couldn't stay with my family. It was not allowed. My family had to come and
Were they
Get me.
Were they in Bucharest?
yeah.
Were they
So-
allowed to come to the hotel? And
Yes,
see
they
you?
were allowed to come, and I would take them to eat. They've never eaten so
Did you
well.
have reason to believe that Romanian communist authorities were spying?
Oh, they were
on
watching everybody.
Everything.
But they watched it even more after what happened to me. And what happened to me, and thanks God I got out of the country, was my daughter got sick the night before Nixon was to arrive, and I didn't have time to go to the embassy to get the accreditation. So after taking her to, I did go to the embassy for a doctor, because the Romanian doctor would not treat her, because the communists would not treat Americans. They were afraid.
You went there with your family?
Yeah. So I took her to my aunt's house, my daughter, and left her there. And
Did your girls speak Romanian?
no. So I went back to the hotel to change clothes. And that was already in the morning of when Nixon was arriving. I had no accreditation. I was so dejected and so frustrated, and everybody, the whole press was staying at my hotel. Then this car came in front of my hotel, NBC. It had an NBC banner on it. And I ran to it and I said, there was a man in the car, and I'm not going to tell you his name. And I said to him, are you going to the airport to meet Nixon? And he said, yes. Take me with you. And he said, fine, come.
Without even knowing you?
He started knowing me. And then we started talking, and in the car, when he found out I spoke Romanian, he said, oh my God, God sent you to us. I said, why you say that? He said, because our interpreter, he was driven by a chauffeur, by the way. He had a chauffeur. It was a limousine. our interpreter is sick. We don't have an interpreter. Will you be the interpreter? I'll pay you $500. I said, no, you don't have to pay me anything. What am I supposed to do? Did you supposed to go over there and get Nixon's Ceausescu's speech, because we knew about Nixon, and translate it, and you'll be on the camera. And I said, well, I'm not accredited. Didn't have time. Oh, no problem. So he typed my name on a card. He had a typewriter under the car. Had a Polaroid camera. Took my picture.
So he made you a press pass.
He made me a press pass. But you know what kind of a press pass? White House press. And I was on television. And I came in as a tourist.
And you were translating for Ceausescu?
No, I was translating for NBC.
I mean, you were translating from Romanian into English?
Yes.
Who was speaking the Romanian?
Ceausescu.
Okay.
Nixon spoke in English.
Yes, right.
So, anyway, I did great. And at the end of the thing, this man was fascinated with me. He said, I want to pay you. I said, I'm going to pay you $500. I said, no, I don't want the money. He said, well, I want to do something for you. You were so nice, and you did this for nothing. And then I looked at the car and the chauffeur, and I said, well, I can't afford to rent a car, and I'm going to be here a few days, and it would be nice to take my family to the country. He said, fine, great. He said, I don't need the car anymore, and the driver, they're yours. That was a big mistake of my life.
How so?
Because he took me to where my aunt was in the neighborhood, and then I saw my aunt who came running towards the car. I said, oh my God, my daughter must be sick. So I told the driver, stop. I walked to my aunt to tell her, look, we have a car, we have a driver. She said, send the car away. I said, no, you don't understand. No, send the car away right now. I said, is Marcel sick? Something wrong? Nothing is wrong. She's fine. Send the car away. And I did. And I said, why? What's wrong? She said, do you know who the driver was of that car? I said, no, who was it? That's the secret police. She said, no, he was hired by NBC. Yes, he was hired by NBC. That's the secret police. She knew. Live in a communist country, you know right away. She said, you're leaving the country. Now, we're taking you to the airport. Called a taxi, went by the hotel, picked up the luggage, and left within an hour.
Within an hour?
You know why? Because of my badge. She said, you came in as a tourist, and all of a sudden, you were on television. Do you know what you are in this country? You're a spy. And anyway, we left. But they were interrogated by the secret police after.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Was there any attempt, to your knowledge, to apprehend you to prevent your leaving?
Oh, sure. They went to the hotel, look for me. I was already at the airport.
Was your husband with you?
No.
Just you and the two girls?
Just one girl.
One girl.
So we left.
Was your husband back here in Atlanta?
Mm-hmm.
What did he think about your going
Oh,
to
he thought,
Romania?
he was so busy with his work, he didn't interfere. But 3 months later, I was sitting at the Chamber of Commerce in my office, minding my own business, when this man walked in, had his badge, FBI. No, CIA. And he said, Mrs. Cunningham, we know of what happened in Romania. And I said, so? He said, we want you to come to Washington. We'd like to talk to you about a possible job. So I went home and told John, and he said, well, maybe you ought to do that for your country. Maybe you could do something for your country. So he said, go. Everything was paid. I went to Washington. And what they wanted me to do is work for them. They were going to...
What nature?
Yeah.
What was the nature
That's
of the
right,
work?
to be a spy. They didn't call it that.
No,
they said an observer.
An observer.
So they want to send me to a trade show. And I took the language test, which I passed. And then they gave me a security test. And that's where they interrogate you about your life.
Yes.
You've had it?
No, well, in a way, yes.
So anyway, they interrogated me, and then they asked me this question. Said, if we send you there, would you be willing to, and we have vital information that you're carrying, would you be a good American and not divulge the information, and we know you have family there, and let your family be hurt? So when they said that, I got up and I said, go to hell, and walked out. And of course, I wasn't interested. I wasn't going to hurt my family. Well, I told them, you want me to be a spy, don't you? No, we want to be an observer. Just want you to go and listen to trade shows. Because I spoke the language, you see. Anyway, so that was the end of that job.
That was the end of that.
Yeah. So I went back to the chamber. And then later on, my boss got fired because they had a.
At the chamber?
Yeah, it was a political position, and they had a new mayor, a new.
Who was the mayor then?
Opie Schultz. Do you remember him?
No.
Oh, he made history in this city. He's a great guy.
But he fired your boss went out because.
Well, no, he didn't fire me.
Yeah.
You know, he loved me. He thought I was great.
Your boss.
But the new boss, the new man that came in, who was a country boy, didn't like me, so he fired me. So then I said, well, I got to find me another job. And I got me another job. I started a talk show in Spanish for that station I was telling you about. And I did that for a year, and then I went into the travel business.
What sort of travel business?
Oh, you know, started selling travel, which was,
Right.
I'm not proud of that part of my life.
How long did you do that?
10 years. But I wasn't working full time. You know, still consul of Costa Rica. That was a big thrust. You know, I went to Costa Rica. I did a lot of things for Costa Rica. We had exchanges. Then when Arias was president, we took a delegation from Georgia Tech. They were going to open a school there when he fell through. And all of this you're going to read in my book. And one more thing. Oh, I got very involved with the Olympics.
With the Olympics? You mean when he came to Atlanta?
I was on the bidding team. 1996. Because of my languages. Everything, I can tell you right now, everything, all the doors opened because of my languages. Everything I've done in my life, exciting, because of the languages. So,
Do you think Atlanta, from the time you arrived here in 1950, up until now, Atlanta was at that time certainly quite a provincial city.
quite.
Has it become more internationalized in your years?
Only from the aspect that we have more international people and the airport. Nothing else. But Atlanta as a city, it's not international, not by my standards.
How would you define an international city?
Well, go to Paris, you don't have to define. You smell it in the air. Go to New York, go to Rome, go to London, even to smaller cities. Atlanta just doesn't have it. No. And this is from an international person. You won't hear this from an Atlanta person. No. An Atlanta person will tell you, oh, we are an international city. They don't even know what it is. We still cannot change money everywhere in this city. We still don't have multilingual signs, you know. And the mentality, it's not international. You know what it is. You know what it is, and I'm not going to say it.
Is there any one particular experience that's in your mind that happened to you before you left Romania that stands out as a vivid memory?
Just the school.
Just the school.
The Catholic school. I remember that clearly. Because we had to wear black uniforms.
All girls?
All girls. Oh, yeah. That stands vividly in my mind. But we also had a very nice family life. My parents entertained a lot, and there was a lot going on.
Have any of your relatives from Romania come to the States?
Yeah, my youngest aunt got married and went to Israel. And my uncle was a diamond setter, a diamond cutter. And they came here to Atlanta to visit us. Unfortunately, my aunt got sick. She had cancer, and she had to go back. They went back to Israel, and she died. Of course, all the other ones died also. I mean, that's.
What family do you have left in Romania today?
Well, strangely enough, I discovered I have a cousin, twice removed, and his father was my mother's first cousin. And I've discovered him through the internet.
How
It's
so?
very
Just
interesting.
Searching
Well,
names?
no. What happened, I got a letter from a woman in Romania who lived with this cousin, who was my mother's first cousin. She found my address in his files. He died. And she wrote to me and said to me who she was. That this first cousin said that he had relatives in the United States, and that was it. And she just wanted to know that he died. So I wrote her back, and I said, well, did he have any children? And she wrote back, and she said, yeah, he had 2 children. Where are they? Those are my cousins. And I started corresponding via email with one cousin. And now they went back to Romania. They lived in Israel, but because what's happening in Israel. See, they escaped from communism. And they wanted to And they're back in. They just went back this year.
From Israel. How long had they lived in Israel?
25 years. Yeah.
Was it, did they, the motivation for their returning to Romania was sort of, they felt like that they had jumped out of the frying pan into the fire
Exactly,
by going
yeah.
there.
Yeah, and my cousin, from what I understand, is a financial marketing expert. So they're back in Romania, and we email. That's how I keep in touch. I want to go see them. I'd like to go next year to Romania.
But it's been about 3 years since you were last there.
Oh, no. That was in 1968. I haven't been back
Oh,
since.
you haven't been back to Romania since 68?
68.
Wow.
No.
There will be some changes.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, they're not communist anymore.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, is there any other facet of your fascinating and interesting life, Mrs. Cunningham,
Yes.
that you would like to share in these
I'd like to
closing
share
moments?
with you one thing.
Yes, please.
From everything I've done and everything I'm doing now, the most exciting thing I'm doing now, it's teaching. I love it. I'm shaping minds, I'm making a difference, and the program at Honorary is extremely successful. And I'm 75 years old, and I'm very proud of the fact that at my age, I can do all of that. And I'm a docent at the Carlos Museum, and I'm very active with Kiwanis downtown. I'm writing my memoirs. The teaching is really my calling. But I have all the, of course, I saw Atlanta grow from a city of, when I came in here in 1950, before 50, Atlanta was 600,000. And now it's 4 million, right? So you talk about a lot of changes, yes. I'll tell you the truth, when I lived in Atlanta, then, during my time, downtown was beautiful. We could go downtown and the restaurants were plentiful. It had an international aspect in a small way.
Did you have lunch sometimes at Rich's?
Oh, yes. And also at Emile, and at Ship Ahoy, Leb's, the Midnight Sun, all these places. This is where we entertain our international guests. And you know, Atlanta was extremely vibrant. Atlanta downtown now, it's dead. Now, you as a historian, I'm sure that maybe you can't say it out loud, but it's dead. Maybe it will change. And you know why. And I'm not going to say it on record. I'll say it when you take off the camera.
Well, I want to thank you so very, very much for sharing this fascinating story of your life, Mrs. Cunningham, and your coming out of Romania and your time in France and Cuba and now the United States for all these years and what you've done with your life. Not only is it fascinating, but you have made a difference in the lives of many, many people.
Yeah, I hope so.
And I know that the repository for these histories will be most grateful for having this as a record. Thank you very, very kindly.
Well, thank you for allowing me to talk.